Kamala Davy Harris, solemnly swear.
Kamala Harris, the first woman, Black, and Asian American to serve as vice president, ran a historic campaign for president as the first woman of color to lead a major party, but fell short in the popular vote and the Electoral College, delivering Donald Trump a second term in office.
Now I know folks are feeling and experiencing a range of emotions right now. I get it. But we must accept the results of this election. Earlier today, I spoke with President-elect Trump and congratulated him on his victory. I also told him that we will help him and his team with their transition, and that we will engage in a peaceful transfer of power.
Harris's run for president was both unconventional and unexpected.
President Biden announces he will not run for re-election.
With just over 100 days until Election Day, President Joe Biden stepping aside in an historic shakeup.
My fellow Americans, the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation.
Vice President Kamala Harris is no stranger to being the first.
I accept your nomination to be President of the United States of America.
From her Bay Area upbringing,
Kamala's come from this neighborhood. She knows the steps from below to up high.
To her historic run for the Oval Office. We speak to the people who grew up with her, worked for her, and covered her for decades.
She gets all criticisms, very few compliments, but that's the nature of the VP's job.
I wanted someone who was strong and who was ready to be president on day one.
Will you pronounce your name for me, please?
It's Kamala.
Kamala Harris.
Hi, Kamala Harris.
It's really inspiration because knowing that she was born in Oakland.
She's from here. She knows what we go through.
Do not be constrained by tradition. Do not listen when they say it can't be done.
She comes at a time when a lot of doors are opening, and she's not afraid to walk through them.
It is about having new leadership. We can have change.
I think it's a journey that is, frankly, an inspiration.
And so to everyone who is watching, do not despair. This is not a time to throw up our hands. This is a time to roll up our sleeves.
The road to the White House for Kamala Harris started here, on this block, Browning and Bancroft in West Berkeley.
So this is West Berkeley. This is my house where I grew up, 2236 Browning Street. Because of a lot of redlining in the Bay Area, they ended up here in West Berkeley, which was predominantly Black, brown, immigrant community. Lots of Caucasians here too, but a very integrated neighborhood. So this is where Kamala and I grew up.
Not far from neighboring Oakland, the birthplace of the Black Panther Party, founded just 2 years after Kamala's birth at Kaiser Hospital in Oakland in 1964. Not far from the University of California, Berkeley, one of the premier academic institutions on the West Coast, where her parents met for the first time, a crossroad that would mold the future vice president.
Huey Newton was a regular in our neighborhood. Black Panthers had a breakfast program down the street at West Campus. So we would see Huey all the time. What I remember so much about Kamala is that she was very kind. I also remember her taking care of Maya. I mean, she was very attentive. You know, she took care of her sister.
A strength she by all accounts inherited from her mother, Shyamala Gopalan, a gifted woman with a sharp mind who bravely immigrated from India to study science at UC Berkeley in 1958. Shyamala would connect Kamala to her rich South Asian heritage with her name, meaning lotus flower, a plant growing underwater with flowers rising above the surface, root planted firmly in the river's bottom. Shyamala met Kamala's father, Donald Harris, on the Berkeley campus protesting during the Civil Rights Movement. He also immigrated to the States from Jamaica and was a brilliant scholar who would go on to teach economics at Stanford University. Her only sibling, sister Maya, was born 3 years after she was. A couple of years after Maya's birth, their parents separated, making the young girls incredibly close. The younger Harris, also an attorney, would go on to have a major influence on Kamala's life and political career. A life filled with first.
There was a little girl in California who was part of the second class to integrate her public schools, and she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me.
We were close to the bus stop, and Kamala and Maya were close to the bus stop. But somehow we always ended up running.
Never close enough.
When Kamala brought it up on the debate stage and said she was in the second class of the kids that integrated the Berkeley Public School, I think it really just hit me so hard. I was like, wow, I didn't realize that. It wasn't something I even thought about, and it was something I enjoyed. I got a great education at Thousand Oaks. Bus ride was probably about 30 to 40 minutes. See the change in the neighborhood as we drive through. This is what we saw too, sitting on the bus. This is where Kamala and myself, my sisters and Maya, we all went to school here.
In her memoirs, The Truths We Hold, Harris celebrates the diversity made possible by what she calls a national experiment in desegregation, sending working-class black kids in one direction and wealthier white kids in the other. That diversity is woven into the fabric of her identity, a superpower of sorts as she broke barrier after barrier.
My mother used to have a saying, and she would say to me, Kamala, you may be the first to do many things, but make sure you're not the last. And
Kamala is claiming both her identities. She's proud to be a black woman. She's proud about her Indian heritage. And she claims them both. And she drops lots of clues, right, implicit and explicit, about her pride and her joy in belonging to those groups.
Her life experiences would become even more diverse when Kamala was in middle school. Her mother moved her and the two girls to Montreal, Canada. She accepted a teaching opportunity at a university. Kamala was 12 at the time. She finished middle and high school in Montreal, visiting the Bay Area for summer breaks and holidays. In the early 80s, Harris moved back to the States and took her first lap around the nation's capital, studying economics and political science at Howard University in Washington, D.C. Howard is often referred to as the Mecca, signifying its place as one of the most illustrious historically black colleges or universities in the entire country.
I try to tell people that these are not just schools where African Americans or people from the African diaspora go to. They're schools that are really dipped in excellence. We've definitely been blessed to have had her on part of her journey, made sure that she was very well equipped and well prepared. But also, I think she gained her confidence, as she has said herself, for that next step.
You could do anything, and you didn't have to be confined by anyone else's idea of what it means to be black.
The first African-American justice to sit on that Supreme Court was Thurgood Marshall, a Howard alum. What this will mean is that she would have cracked that glass ceiling, if not smashed it, with a Howard hammer.
this is a fight to define what kind of country we are. And it's a fight to determine what kind of country we will be. And it's a fight to determine whether we are willing to stand up for our deepest values. Because let's be clear, we are better than this.
She would pledge Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority her last semester senior year, gaining a greater sisterhood in the AKAs, the first historically African-American Greek-lettered sorority founded on Howard's campus. Harris graduated in 1986. By now, D.C. was known as Chocolate City for its majority African-American population that was reflected in its culture. The mayor was black arts and businesses flourished, and for the first time in her life, Harris found herself in the majority. She then returned to the San Francisco Bay Area, deciding to pursue a career in the legal field. She attended University of California Law San Francisco for law school, where, in her second year, she became the president of the Black Law Students Association. She earned her law degree in '89. By 1990, she was a deputy district attorney for Alameda County, working for the people in her hometown, where her representation alone would go on to inspire many.
As a San Francisco Chronicle columnist, I've been covering the politics and the personalities of the Bay Area for as long as I can remember, maybe too long. Even when you first met her, you knew something was there. There was an intelligence, there was a vibrancy, and there was that essential ingredient in all political success, ambition. There's no question that Kamala Harris made the most of her contacts and personal relationships in San Francisco. The leading of that is former Mayor Willie Brown, who was the House Speaker of the time when she first met him.
She would later date him briefly.
He also sort of introduced her to the Nob Hill set and the Pacific Heights set. They are the financiers of the political machine in San Francisco, a key ingredient in that. And along with Gavin Newsom, Jerry Brown, and Willie Brown, she became part of that group as well.
Never underestimate Kamala Harris. She has been a winner each and every time she has sought public office.
After 8 years in Alameda County, she'd crossed the bay to San Francisco to become Assistant District Attorney. After 2 years, she left the job, then working in San Francisco City Hall under City Attorney Louise Rini, one of her first supporters when she challenged her old boss in 2002 to become San Francisco DA. It would be Harris's first time appearing on a ballot. In order to run the office, she had to run for office, as she said in her memoir.
As I hold the office
of District Attorney of the City and County of San Francisco.
Of District Attorney of the City and County of San Francisco.
Congratulations.
This was her office. So when we moved in, Terrence had moved out all the furniture. So when we walked in, he had, out of her office, left nothing. So she worked like this. It was just like a chair and a phone for like 2 weeks. People always underestimate how hard she works. I remember so clearly walking into the first California District Attorneys Association meeting with Kamala, and she starts talking about recidivism reduction and reentry services and the vision that she had for the office. And I just remember some people in the room looking at her, like, what has happened here? Who is this person?
Immediately after winning, she faced her first political crisis when Isaac Espinosa, a San Francisco police officer, was gunned down that she wouldn't seek the death penalty for the person who did it.
I have been very clear that I am not seeking the death penalty as district attorney because life without possibility of parole is a severe consequence.
And that sent a chill right down her and the Police Officers Association, and even got her a very public sort of reprimand from Dianne Feinstein at the funeral. That was one of the key chilling moments of her career.
At the end of Harris's tenure as district attorney, violent crime was down, murder and manslaughter numbers were cut in half, and burglary and aggravated assault dropped by double digits.
I think people get it wrong oftentimes because they just say, well, she's a prosecutor, she tried to lock up a lot of Black and brown people, and that is just not entirely accurate when you look at the details of what was happening in San Francisco at the time, and also some of the innovative programs that she pushed for to give people a second chance.
During her stay, she'd worked to help not criminalize sex workers and get first-time nonviolent offenders back on track instead of incarcerated. Next, Harris's political ambitions would take her to a statewide office, elected to Attorney General of California in 2010.
For being a voice that is a new voice in the process, and in the way that we believe we should always be inclusive as a party, in recognizing that we have a big tent, which means that we welcome those who we may not have seen in the tent before, and we value their contribution.
That was the closest race of her life, and it wasn't decided on election night. It took weeks of vote counting.
After 3 weeks of vote counting and a swinging tally, her challenger conceded, handing her the headline to her long list of first, the first African American, first woman, and first Asian American to become Attorney General in the Golden State. She'd get there with the help of a political ally, also no stranger to first.
Obama, after he won that Senate seat, one of the first trips he took was right here to San Francisco to do a fundraiser for Kamala. When he ran for president, Kamala was one of the first ones to support him in the state. She was the first elected in California to stand with him.
What a lot of people don't realize is that Kamala Harris's decision to support Barack Obama, which was genuine, which was a genuine connection there, philosophically and personally, cost her. Some of her key donors were big Hillary Clinton people, and they did not like the idea that she went with him.
During her time as Attorney General, she defended the state's use of the death penalty, despite opposing its use years earlier as San Francisco District Attorney, but also fought against voter-approved Prop 8, the state constitutional amendment which saw only marriage between a man and a woman as valid.
The wedding bells are about to ring.
During her tenure as California's top cop, she focused on school truancy by pushing criminal penalties for parents of children missing from school, a policy from her days as DA. Her team also improved DNA testing to clear backed-up state crime labs and rape test kits. Harris's office would write the manual on implicit bias training for police officers, support law enforcement wearing body cameras, and require all agencies in the state to collect data on people shot and killed by police.
She sort of got to pick and choose what she was going to do, and she does that well. And so, she evolves over time and adapts with that.
Soon, her voice would have a much larger platform.
I will not be running for the Senate in 2016.
No exploratory committees or coy responses for Attorney General Kamala Harris. In her Facebook announcement this morning, she says, "I'm launching my campaign to be a voice for the people of California in the United States Senate."
Harris was the early favorite and landed a decisive victory on election night, thanks to major endorsements from then California Governor Jerry Brown, outgoing President Barack Obama, and his Vice President, Joe Biden.
When she ran, that was almost considered like, is this the right move for her? Because at the time, it appeared that Hillary Clinton was going to be the president. And Kamala Harris, by being the newly elected senator from California, was going to be in the back, was going to go to Washington and likely would not be heard of for years to come. What happened was an election night. It wasn't Hillary Clinton, it was Donald Trump. On that night, she made that infamous, "We will resist, we will fight." She was the voice that came out of the West that night to the country and to the world.
Do we retreat or do we fight? I say we fight. I intend to fight. I intend to fight for Black Lives Matters. I intend to fight for truth and transparency and trust. I intend to fight. I intend to fight for a woman's access to health care and reproductive health rights. I intend to fight against those naysayers who suggest that there is no such thing as climate change. I intend to fight for our environment. I intend to fight for the civil rights of all people, including those that we always fought for in terms of allowing them to marry the person they love. I intend to fight.
And it was immediately picked up. Who is this person in California? And she instantly became one of the leaders of the resistance. And that moment created the Kamala Harris that is today.
In the Senate, she put her prosecutorial prowess front and center, often making headlines and grabbing national attention.
And it is incumbent on the Attorney General of the United States to fight for the civil rights of all people. I think you're thinking of someone and you don't want to tell us.
A presence and moment that would be maimed. It would eventually make her a household name, even if people tripped over it. With her election to the Senate, she shattered yet another glass ceiling, becoming the first Indian American woman and just the second Black woman to serve as a senator. And just 2 years into her tenure, she was ready to shatter expectations once again.
I am running for President of the United States.
Well,
and I'm very excited about it. I'm running for president because I love my country. I love my country. I'm running to be president of the people, by the people, and for all people.
Despite strong debate performances,
that's why we need to pass the Equality Act,
and a strong run in the early laps of the most crowded field of Democratic presidential hopefuls in history, she ran out of money and called it quits before the Iowa caucuses, ending her bid for the White House.
It is with deep regret, but also with deep gratitude, that I am suspending our campaign today. But I want to be clear with you, I am still very much in this fight.
Biden won the Democratic Party's nomination. In the backdrop, racial tension spilled over into the streets, fueled by high-profile police killings of Black people. Biden's response, a short list of running mates dominated by women of color. Despite their early debate clashes, he included Harris, noting on a pad, "Do not hold grudges."
I kind of had a feeling, for weeks leading up to it, something just told me, or I just felt that it was going to be her. We were each other's first friend back when we were about 5 years old, kindergarten. She could not have made it as far as she has without dealing with just unimaginable obstacles and challenges every step of the way. And she's a fighter, but she holds true to herself.
Hi. Sorry to keep you.
No, that's all right. You ready to go to work?
Oh my God. I'm so ready to go to work.
Let me introduce to you, for the first time, your next Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris.
The junior senator from California became the first Black and first South Asian woman to appear on a major party ticket in U.S. history. The announcement stole the headlines, trended on social media, and deeply touched the hearts and souls of so many.
Very personal. It's amazing. And it really shows what people of color have the capability to do if they're given a chance. And it's very, I'm very proud, and I'm excited for the possibilities.
And I think that's another thing that's been, I think, heavy on her shoulders at times, given all the barriers that she's broken through, but also this awesome responsibility that she holds really tightly of she's representing, all the young Black and Indian girls. She's representing so many women that, look at her on that debate stage and say, wow, there she is.
She spent the home stretch of the race to the White House on the attack for her running mate, taking on President Trump and Vice President Mike Pence head on.
Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking.
I'm
speaking. We have seen a pattern with this administration, which is they don't believe in science. And Joe's plan is about saying we're going to deal with it, but we're also going to create jobs. Donald Trump, when asked about the wildfires in California, and the question was, the science is telling us this, you know what Donald Trump said? Science doesn't know.
She turned heads with her swag on the campaign trail, the music choices,
I'm gonna stand a little taller.
the shoe choices, and her cooking.
I don't want to suffer the consequences of our future president not liking my Indian food.
The entire time, her husband Doug Imhoff cheering her on. Her determination and drive helping secure the presidency for the former Vice President Joe Biden.
All across the nation, little girls woke up, especially little Black and brown girls, who so often feel overlooked today. Just maybe they're seeing themselves for the first time in a new way.
How would you say she walks into being the first in so many regards?
Rather comfortably.
Kamala Davy Harris, do solemnly swear.
I, Kamala Davy Harris, do solemnly swear
that I.
January 20th, 2021, Kamala Harris sworn in as Vice President of the United States with husband Doug Imhoff by her side. The two writing a new page in history as the first woman, Black and South Asian American, to hold the second highest elected office, and Mr. Imhoff as the first ever second gentleman. Just 2 weeks prior, those same steps outside of the U.S. Capitol were the site of a dark day in America's history, the January 6th insurrection. Hundreds of Americans, many of them white supremacists, stormed the Capitol, threatening to hang then Vice President Mike Pence as he prepared to certify the election results that would put Joe Biden and Kamala Harris in the White House.
I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard.
5 people died in the days after the attack, including a police officer. Nearly 200 more officers were injured as the mob made its way from a Trump rally down the Capitol Mall into the U.S. Capitol. Their goal, to stop the count of electoral votes, calling the election rigged in an echo of the former president, though there was no evidence to support that claim. The division so publicly telegraphed on that day, setting the stage for the tumultuous 4 years to come.
Vice President Kamala Harris on her first international trip in Guatemala.
On a major mission to reduce the flow of migrants to the U.S. border.
Right out of the gate, President Biden handed VP Harris a tough assignment, getting to the root causes of what was sending thousands of migrants to the U.S.-Mexico border.
What she focused on was trying to do economic development, trying to stabilize the governments of Central America where so many migrants come from. Clearly, there's a problem of unchecked immigration, migration across the border. Well, as a vice president, nobody ever has figured out how to deal with it.
Harris stopped in Guatemala and toured the southern border as the crisis intensified, delivering this now infamous speech.
I want to be clear to folks in this region who are thinking about making that dangerous trek to the United States-Mexico border. Do not come. Do not come. The goal of our work is to help Guatemalans find hope at home.
The Biden-Harris administration was hammered by the right for inaction. Years later, Trump urged House Republicans to kill a bipartisan border deal in an effort to deprive the administration of a legislative victory. In the months to come, the focus would shift from the unsettled issue of immigration to what was believed to have been a long-settled issue of abortion rights.
I'm grateful to the Lord. The Roe v. Wade's been overturned.
Women without means will suffer.
In a major blow to women's reproductive freedom, the U.S. Supreme Court erased nearly 50 years of precedent, overturning Roe v. Wade. What was once a national right to an abortion was stripped away by the court's conservative supermajority.
The court actually took a constitutional right that has been recognized for half a century and took it from the women of America. That's shocking.
Vice President Kamala Harris came out strong against the ruling in the hours and days ahead.
They talk about their concern that if their daughter is going to college, will she go to a state where she will have access to the health care she might need, including reproductive health? In some of these states, a ban on abortion includes denying a survivor of rape or incest the ability to make a decision about what happens to their body next. It's a big deal.
While there were certainly challenges during Harris's term as vice president, there were successes too, like the passage of the bipartisan infrastructure law that spent more than $1 trillion to improve roads, bridges, and public transit, expand internet access, and upgrade water and energy supply. She also cast the tie-breaking vote in the Senate for the Inflation Reduction Act.
The Senate being equally divided, the Vice President votes in the affirmative, and the bill, as amended, is passed.
That helped lower prescription drug costs and made health care more affordable. However, as customary, the praise goes to the president.
I have to be honest, Kamala Harris has been in a tough situation. She, as number 2, defends, deflects, and goes out there and attacks for the president. Accomplishments always go to the president. She gets all criticisms, very few compliments, but that's the nature of the VP's job.
Take the administration's handling of the war in Gaza as another example, and the death of civilians in Israel's repeated bombing of the region. Israel's military action was in response to the Hamas attack on October 7, 2023, when Hamas fighters and other Palestinian militant groups abducted 251 people from Israel, taking them to the Gaza Strip. U.S. support of the war effort drew sharp criticism at home. Protests would stretch from the Bay Bridge and Golden Gate Bridge in the Bay Area to college campuses across the country and the nation's capital. The administration's support of the war in Gaza would plummet Biden's approval rating. It caused anxiety within the Democratic Party and led tens of thousands of dissatisfied Democrats to vote uncommitted in the 2024 presidential primary in key swing states like Michigan. Polls increasingly showed President Biden trailing former President Trump by several points as the two men marched toward a 2020 rematch and the 2024 race for the White House.
American politics was in a pressure cooker, with the majority of voters saying, I don't care for either one at the top.
Little did the American people know, the race for president was about to take a dramatic turn, and Kamala Harris was on the verge of getting yet another major break. With more than 4 months to go before the 2024 election, President Biden and former President Trump went head-to-head in the earliest presidential debate ever scheduled.
Making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the COVID. With dealing with everything we have to do with. Look, if we finally beat Medicare.
The night was filled with gaffes for the 81-year-old president. That debate would mark the beginning of the end for President Biden's re-election bid.
Some within your own party are wondering if President Biden should even step aside. What do you say to that?
First of all, what we saw tonight is the president making a very clear contrast with Donald Trump on all of the issues that matter to the American people. Yes, there was a slow start, but it was a strong finish.
Vice President Harris stood behind President Biden, but in the days ahead, more and more Democrats called on the president to end his re-election campaign. Democratic donors withheld major campaign money.
Senator Chuck Schumer over the weekend traveled to Rehoboth, Delaware, visited one-on-one with President Biden, and very directly, very bluntly told him that it would be bad for him and bad for Democrats if he stayed in the race, urged him to get out of the race.
Well, I have the greatest respect for the president. We just wanted him to make the decision on how we best preserve that legacy.
But the gaffes continued.
Now I want to hand it over to the president of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin. President Putin. He's going to beat President Putin. President Zelensky. I'm so focused on beating Putin.
Take a look at what happened.
What was already a contentious race for the White House nearly turned deadly. A lone gunman shot President Trump in an assassination attempt at an outdoor rally just outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The shooter grazed Trump's ear, killed a firefighter, and injured 2 others. The gunman was also killed in that altercation. The assassination attempt gave Trump a bump in favorability leading into the Republican National Convention. Days later, while isolating in his Delaware home while recovering from COVID, the president delivered the shocking news: he would end his run for president.
The breaking news at this hour, President Biden announces he will not run for re-election. The historic decision upending the race for the White House.
My fellow Americans, the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation.
And after his decision late today, the president immediately endorsing Vice President Kamala Harris.
What was going through my mind, it was like a jump ball. And I was going, the Democrats have a choice here. And what they did, surprisingly, was jump and go lockstep from there across the country. Nobody's making demands. Nobody's saying, I want something for my vote. Everybody's saying, let's go. I've never seen that before.
In a matter of hours after President Biden made his unprecedented decision to pass the torch, Vice President Kamala Harris amassed widespread support within the Democratic Party.
The Democratic women of the House offer our proud, full-throated endorsement of her campaign for President of the United States.
Fending off potential challengers, Kamala Harris locked up the necessary number of delegates to secure the nomination just weeks before the Democratic National Convention.
We called to say Michelle and I couldn't be prouder to endorse you and to do everything we can to get you through this election and into the Oval Office.
Oh my goodness. Michelle, Brock, this means so much to me. I am looking forward to doing this with the 2 of you.
For a lot of her career has been the recipient of breaks. This was thrust upon her. The job of the vice president is to take over when the president falls. She had no choice. It was right there. It was done. That's it. I'm sure she was as surprised as anybody else, but she has no choice. This is the #1 draft, and she is in it.
Not wasting any time, Harris immediately hit the campaign trail.
And I thank you also for your support over the years and for being the first union to endorse me this week.
As the nation waited to learn who Harris would call on to be her running mate, we learned about one of the first calls she made when she got the news from President Biden that her time was now.
Oh, I've known her over 25 years.
Reverend Amos C. Brown is the senior pastor of San Francisco's Third Baptist Church and the president of the local NAACP chapter.
My wife and I had just arrived at home, and the phone rang. And lo and behold, when I answered, I heard this voice say, "My pastor," that's what she always called me. "I call you to ask you to pray for me, for Doug. Pray for the country."
As the dust settled and it became increasingly clear that Harris's move to the top of the ticket fundamentally changed the 2024 race for the White House, Republicans launched a new wave of personal attacks on the vice president.
What happened to her laugh? I haven't heard that laugh in about a week. That's why they keep her off the stage. That's the laugh of a crazy person, I will tell you.
From the president's meltdown on the first debate, to the attempted assassination of Donald Trump, to the president's withdrawal on a Sunday via the internet, to Kamala Harris assuming the mantle in record time, to now moving forward with an unprecedented short campaign for the highest office in the free world. It's like nothing we've ever seen before, and we're not even at the end. All I can say is stay tuned, because this show is really a nail-biter.
Who's ready to retire Joe Biden and border czar Kamala Harris and send her back to California?
Kamala Harris.
Kamala Harris is the highest-ranking elected woman in American political history. She's been in the national spotlight for the better part of a decade, but some people still cannot get her name right.
President Trump did the job that Kamala won't and Joe Biden simply can't.
Our border czar, Kamala Harris.
Yes, some people are still mispronouncing her name.
Kamala Harris.
Dr. Brandy Summers, sociologist at Columbia University, argues there's more to it.
If it's not intentional, the intentional component is that they're not willing to learn how to say her name properly. So she not only is othered because she's a woman, where this is a terrain that's mostly dominated by men. She's othered because her name is different. And so thinking about her mixed race identity, it's creating another othering potential for people to be able to ostracize her and say that she's too different to be a leader in this nation.
These types of attacks against Harris have only intensified.
I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she black?
But Harris is no stranger to the digs or being underestimated.
She certainly has a thick skin. She has to have to go through what she's gone through as vice president. You know, she just kind of keeps going.
And Harris is unafraid of hitting back.
And you may have noticed, Donald Trump has been resorting to some wild lies about my record, and some of what he and his running mate are saying, well, it's just plain weird.
She's acknowledged to be the worst vice president in the history of our country.
We are such forgetful people. We have such amnesia. I mean, everybody says, does she have the administrative chops to run the country? Did Barack Obama? Donald Trump, did he ever run anything government-wise? Or no. So we kind of, I don't know how much of that is being assigned to her because she's a her. I have to be honest, you know?
Despite the increasing attacks from the right, Harris assuming the top of the Democratic ticket reinvigorated her party.
You think you just fell out of a coconut tree? You exist in the context of all in which you live and will came.
Her speeches would be memed and even turned into music videos.
Well, there's a lot of buzz, and well, there should be. I mean, up until now, American politics was in a pressure cooker, with the majority of voters saying, I don't care for either one at the top. Now there's a new option. So yes, the internet's going to explode. TikTok is going to TikTok out. X is going to Y and Z. Politics is a series of sugar highs. And the question is, how long can you sustain them?
That next sugar high, Harris announcing her running mate.
The AP reporting over the weekend, Vice President Kamala Harris interviewed 6 potential running mates ahead of her most critical decision yet.
The shortlist included high-profile Democratic governors from Kentucky, Pennsylvania, Illinois, and Minnesota, Senator Mark Kelly of Arizona, and Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. She would ultimately go with Governor Tim Walz from the North Star State.
It's Kamala Harris. Good morning, Governor.
Good morning, Madam Vice President.
Listen, I want you to do this with me. Let's do this together. Would you be my running mate and let's get this thing on the road?
I would be honored, Madam Vice President.
They wasted no time hitting the campaign trail.
What you're also hearing is a tremendous sigh of relief from the Democratic Party and from its members and from its voters, because the relief is that Joe Biden is not in the race any longer. They feel there's hope now, that there's a chance out there.
That couldn't be any more apparent than at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago.
So let's get out there. Let's fight for it. Let's get out there. Let's vote for it. And together, let us write the next great chapter in the most extraordinary story ever told.
Harris would continue to ride that wave of energy from the Democratic National Convention onto the campaign trail and to the first and only debate between the vice president and former President Trump.
So let's now welcome the candidates to the stage, Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald Trump.
It started with a handshake, but within minutes, the gloves were off.
You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom. And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you.
She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go, she's busing them in and paying them to be there. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs. The people that came in, they're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country, and it's a shame.
You talk about extreme.
Despite a pair of late October surprises, first by a comedian at Donald Trump's Madison Square Garden rally.
There's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah, I think it's called Puerto Rico.
And then by President Biden responding to those offensive comments.
The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters.
The race remained tight, a virtual dead heat through Election Day.
Latest polling averages from 538, the 7 states that are almost certainly going to determine the presidency, things close as ever, and we're seeing a very slight Trump edge in several of the battleground states. Kamala Harris's numbers have gone down just a little bit, although all within the margin of error.
With just days to go as the two candidates crisscrossed battleground states, they made their final pitches to voters.
And I'd like to begin by asking a very simple question. Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? I'm here today with a message of hope for all Americans.
And this election is more than just a choice between two parties and two different candidates. It is a choice about whether we have a country rooted in freedom for every American or ruled by chaos and division.
In the early morning hours after Election Day, as votes were still being counted in some states, ABC News projected Donald Trump had won a second term in office.
Breaking news, we are projecting at this hour the 47th President of the United States, Donald Trump, will be elected to return to the White House.
In the hours after the race was called, Harris delivered her concession speech from her alma mater of Howard University.
While I concede this election, I do not concede the fight that fueled this campaign. The fight for freedom, for opportunity, for fairness, and the dignity of all people. A fight for the ideals at the heart of our nation, the ideals that reflect America at our best. That is a fight I will never give up. And may that work guide us, even in the face of setbacks, toward the extraordinary promise of the United States of America. I thank you all. May God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America. I thank you all.
A solemn close to a historic campaign.
It shows that, history is not an indicator or a limiter of what is possible.
It gives me hope for the future, seeing that other people of color, other black individuals, are making strides and are making a big difference in our political system.
She is really rooted in helping other people, in uplifting other people. That's who she is. Every time I see her, I see authentically Kamala Harris.